Hello, welcome to the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. I am your host, Roy Kessel, and today we are very excited to have with us Trina Bolton. Trina is the Program Officer in the Sports Diplomacy Division of the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs for the U.S. Department of State. That's quite a long title. Do you have to use that every time you do your introduction?
No, usually it's just sports diplomacy, a sports diplomat, I'd like to think of myself as.
That's a good role. It's something we could use a lot of with everything going on in the world right now. And as we record this in the midst of the Black Lives Matter gaining a lot of attention, we'll certainly spend some time on that. But when most people think of sports, they don't think of diplomacy. Other than trying to lobby the official to get a call in their favor is the only type of diplomacy that you usually see in a sporting event. So tell us a little bit more about your background and what drew you to the sports diplomacy space.
Yes, so thank you. So you mentioned this has been a wild year. It's 2020. And with coronavirus and the Black Lives Matter movement just erupting, I definitely find, this is with my personal chapeau on, it's a time to recalibrate and to motivate and to support one another. And we all know sport can play a powerful role in uniting people of different backgrounds and healing communities. So I hope very much that the work that we've already done and the work that we will do will help us on home turf and all around the world. So it has been a heavy few months, but we are forward looking, and I'm personally learning day by day. And so I thank you for this opportunity. It's really an interesting time to speak to what I do. In terms of my background, I'm in Washington, D.C. now. I'm working with the U.S. Department of State, of course. I hail from Atlanta. So it was the 1996 Olympics and Paralympics that were a game changer in my life. I was younger. I was a kid, but I went to see a lot of events. My mom got those tickets, and I got to see Carl Lewis win his 6th gold medal. And I just remember the stadium and the flashing lights and seeing everyone cheering and saying, this is really powerful. This is putting our city on the map. This is more than just this long jump. It's more than the gymnastics and the soccer. And so I always had that. I lived in France for a little bit when I was a kid too, and definitely played in the playground with all of the kids, and didn't speak French fluently. Still don't, unfortunately, but we could always play sports together, whether it was football or elastique. So that's back to my very early days. I went to George Washington University for undergraduate. And so DC was a familiar place to me, and I focused on international affairs. I ran cross country while I was at GW. During my childhood, I played a lot of sports, but I played soccer primarily, and then I realized it wasn't really my sport, because when we would get in trouble with drills or with plays, we would have to run laps, and I would always hope that we would get in trouble so that I could run laps. And then I realized, I think I should just be running. So that was a team bonding experience for me, and it showed me the importance of sport in my life. And then I worked at the Brookings Institution afterwards, and it was here when I read a book by the Brookings Press called Why the U.S. Plays Baseball and the Rest of the World Plays Soccer, or something along those lines. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I moved back to Atlanta, and I was lucky enough to later work with the IRC, a refugee resettlement agency, who had ties to a team called the Fugees. And it was a refugee soccer team of kids who were playing harmoniously together and got really good with very limited resources. And now they're definitely on the map as a strong team in the state of Georgia. And I saw that happen. I was like, that's very interesting. I went to graduate school, and my capstone focused on the impact of the Olympic bid process on urban development. It's not particularly sexy, but it was a quantitative and qualitative look at the many factors, the bad and the good around mega sporting events. So streamlines. And I found myself in DC again through my graduate school program, learned about the sports diplomacy division. Said, those are my people. It's like the hippies and the jocks, the Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs of the State Department. And I was lucky enough to start essentially 8 years ago. And our office uses sport to build bridges between Americans and people all around the world at the grassroots level, all the way up to the ministerial level. And we work with our colleagues at the U.S. Embassies in every corner of the world to run these programs, but we always use them. Sports is the hook to promote foreign policy priorities, whether it's conflict resolution, HIV/AIDS prevention, women's empowerment, disability rights, respect for diversity. Our goal is to support a more stable and secure society, and sports is a way to get to a new demographic and audience that otherwise may not be tuned in on as to what the U.S. embassies are talking about. It's also a way to really provide opportunities for Americans who are interested in sport for social change, sport for development, and international sports.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about the impact on foreign efforts and so many different countries involved. When we ran our Sports Philanthropy World Conference last year, we had inquiries from 87 countries around the world that wanted to participate. So we may need your help expediting visas for some of these people.
Oh, no, that's not my portfolio. Sorry, that's consular affairs. But we work with lots of bureaus at the State Department, different regional bureaus and consular affairs. We do work with them. We work with the Bureau of Democracy, Human Rights and Labor. We work with the Bureau of Population, Refugees, Migration. We work with the Bureau of International Organizations. So we're cross-cutting in that way. Our bureau is really about people-to-people exchanges. As you know, the U.S. Department of State is government to government, even business to business. But we're all about academic exchanges, cultural exchanges, sports exchanges. And our office is quite young within our broader bureau. You all may be aware, of ping pong diplomacy, the historical use of sports in foreign policy making. And yes, that is the same idea, same mission. But our office was stood up after September 11th. And so quite young, and as a means of reaching out to Muslim youth, primarily boys, with soccer. But we've expanded, we've included thousands of participants, all regions, the whole spectrum of sports. We're open-minded to whatever sport, as long as it supports our mission and our goal. So I was saying, I think I maybe told you, Roy, that we ran a flying disc golf program in Russia, Ekaterinburg, Russia, on entrepreneurship. And at first I was a little skeptical as to why am I doing this? And it was a success. It was something new, and it was about enterprise and leveling the playing field. We use action sports to level the playing field in different communities where one pool of kids or young people may be better at a certain sports, so that everyone is falling on the bottom together and learning together.
Yeah, sports certainly has a power to break down those barriers, and that's one of the things that's intriguing with the work that you do. So tell us a little bit about how that actually functions. Obviously, some of this is taking people to other countries, and some of it is bringing them to the U.S. So maybe we can take it let's do it in the reverse order. So let's start first of all with how you would bring people here to engage them from other countries.
Of course. So our office actually describes ourselves as having 4 key pillars. And you mentioned the inbound groups coming to the United States. So there's various mechanisms in terms of doing this, but our sports visitor program, that's when we work with the U.S. embassies and consulates all around the world to recruit youth and coaches or sports administrators to come to the US for a short-term program, fast-paced, 2 to 3 weeks. They usually come through the nation's capital, DC, but we always have them go to another city. We want Americans to be able to interact with them, and we want them to see another part of the United States. Sometimes these are designed around kind of mini mega events, whether it's a Little League World Series or the Endeavor Games taking place right now, I want to say. We really embed the foreign policy message. It might be English language training, health and wellness, and sports it's our vehicle. What I love about this program in particular is it doesn't require English. Even within our bureau, say Fulbright is in our bureau, but it's elite to a certain degree in that it requires English. But this is a way to get to this new audience. They don't have to be superstar players either. We're not looking for elite players. We're looking for change agents in the community. They often don't even know one another. So it's building ties amongst young athletes, young minds in different countries. Sometimes they're multi-country, and we can have interpreters. And it's wonderful to see the Americans play shoulder to shoulder with their peers from every corner of the world. That's our sports visitor program. We run that with a FHI 360 right now. So we team up with different American NGOs to do the ins and outs of our programming. And there's a lot of behind the scenes. Of course, I won't go into how the sports diplomacy sausage is made, but there's budgets, and we work with our embassies, and there's a proposal process, but we always want to make sure it resonates with the community at hand. It supports our colleagues' integrated country strategies and our overall Bureau's mission to promote mutual understanding, and the State Department's overarching mission towards a more stable society around the world. And regardless of what administration, at the end of the day, it's about peace, security, livelihood, and building friendships with people through sports. So that's our sports visitor program. On the flip side, we have a sports envoy pillar, and that's when we work with the U.S. leagues and federations, because we don't have a ministry of sports, so they serve as kind of our governing bodies to vet American athletes who go overseas to act as ambassadors of goodwill on behalf of the U.S. government. Short-term programs, but big footprint. There's a lot of media, there's large clinics, a lot of work on our colleagues out in the field for these programs. We love our sports envoys. They're American citizens. They can speak to what they want, what they need, but they always stand for the democratic values that we aim to promote. So that's why we work with the leagues and federations to really identify who would be the best fit. They serve pro bono, and sometimes we seek targets of opportunity. If there's a Team USA traveling tour overseas, or if there's an athlete even that may be visiting a family member or going on vacation, we seek those because they're economical and efficient. And they're not always these big household names. It's not about a big splash. I think Roy told you we've sent out Shaq and Alex Morgan and Katie Ledecky, but we always want them to be role models and to understand the name of the game, the sports diplomacy game. It's not just about shaking hands and meeting an ambassador. It's about leading clinics in Diridawa for a week. So I'm so appreciative of our sports envoys for doing what they do and serving as our representatives. And our third program is our International Sports Programming Initiative. And this is on an annual basis. Certified 501c3s in the U.S. are eligible to receive funding to conduct their own two-way people-to-people exchanges using sports as the platform. A lot of universities, a lot of NGOs, using sport for social change. And so we're not as intimately involved in these programs with our embassies as we are with the two other programs that I've described, but they allow for us to expand the depth and breadth of our footprint and our expertise, because these different organizations may have focused their entire livelihood on sitting volleyball or on monitoring and evaluation. And so we partner with different U.S. institutions to do international two-way programming. So an American cohort will go out, and then international delegates will come back. And we love seeing a lot of integration and connections between our different pillars that supports the sustainability of our programming. And our fourth program is our Global Sports Mentoring Program. It spawned out of our Empowering Women and Girls Through Sports initiative, largely self-explanatory title. And within it, we have a public-private partnership with ESPNW. It's our Global Sports Mentoring Program to empower women, so to bring the global lessons of Title IX to lives in the States and all around the world. So we work with ESPNW to secure a slate of senior female executives in the sports sector here in the US. It's a rotating roster every year, but there's, say, Procter & Gamble, Google, New Balance, Coca-Cola in the past, ESPN hosted itself. And we team them up with just the best of the best in the world of women's sports from all around the world. Journalists, coaches, referees, female umpires, yes, heads of leagues or federations. And they do speak English. It's a professional development exchange. We're in our 8th year. There's over 130 sports women in over 60 countries, and they are paying it forward for the next generation. Really just impressive sports women, and always there when you need them. We're big on storytelling with ESPNW, naturally. We've teamed up with the University of Tennessee's Center for Sport, Peace, and Society as our cooperative partner on this program. And they're experts on gender rights in sports and have been wonderful counterparts on this global initiative. So we do a lot of tracking, surveying, monitoring, and evaluation, and storytelling, but it's all about this action plan that these women will put into play when they get back home. Anything and everything. We're talking community basketball centers, sneaker companies, bringing Title IX type legislation to the table in their country. So using this model, we created a cousin program, Sport for Community, and it's our mentorship program on disability rights, men and women from around the world. In the Paralympics, the Deaflympics, and the Special Olympics spaces come to the U.S. for a 5-week mentorship. They're teamed up with a mentor here. They focus on an action plan that they'll put into play. And the overarching goal is to promote the global lessons of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And it's the ADA's 30th birthday in 2020. So something else that's monumental this year, a lot going down in the history books. So that's one of our State Department priorities, in particular this year, is to promote ADA, accessibility and opportunity for people with disabilities in sports and in society.
Well, you've certainly got your hands full with all of those different initiatives. It's, any one of those could be a full-time focus just in and of itself. I'm curious, as you said, the first two where you're talking about your sports visitor program and your sports envoy program, it sounds like that's where you're much more hands-on involved in the actual operation of the program or the visits. I'm interested to hear, for a lot of the groups in our network, I think the third one is where many of them might fit in for this international sports programming initiative, where 501c3s can work with you to essentially export, for lack of a better term, export their programs and take those to different countries. So maybe give us a little bit of a sense of how that process starts and what an organization would need to do to go into that opportunity.
Of course, so we're getting down into the weeds, but I'm more than happy to describe this. So my colleague manages the International Sports Programming Initiative portfolio. We all operate through partnerships, and trust me, all of our programs, we actually are quite hands-on for all of them. Even ISPI, the Global Sports Mentoring Program, very hands-on from start to finish in terms of design, follow-on, meetings in person. That is rare sometimes, I want to say, in the U.S. government to have so much FaceTime, to look at all of these passports and then meet them and develop relationships myself. I've just been so fortunate to learn from, we always say it's a two-way street. The Americans, we learn just as much, if not more, from these experiences. So it's definitely a win-win. And so back to the nuts and bolts of the International Sports Programming Initiative, there's an annual competition. It's through grants.gov. You can check our website. I don't know when the solicitation process is opened up this year, but nonprofit organizations are eligible to submit these proposals. They're quite cumbersome. It is also the government, and we want to do due diligence. In the past, we used to accept applications from even just any small NGO. In the face of limitations and challenges, it does have to be a larger organization. Like, we partner with World Learning, big universities that have a track record of having worked with our Bureau. And unfortunately, that does rule out some partners. But I will say, every final large grant that is given to a bigger NGO in the US, they in turn are responsible for teaming up with sub-recipients. So the smaller NGOs who may be able to partner with a university and work their niche magic or their very focalized region in sports or whatnot. So there are opportunities for smaller organizations, if that's the Sports Philanthropy Network, to team up with larger umbrella organizations, and we can help connect those dots after the awards are even granted. You can also develop those relationships and talk with potential applicants before the proposal process.
So for example, a smaller organization in our network might be able to team up with, let's say, as you said, a university that's got a sports management or sports and society type of program where they could then work under the umbrella of an educational institution that may have an existing relationship with you from a grant management capacity to give you that comfort level. What is the range of the grant sizes or opportunities that fit within that? Because I know a lot of groups, as you described the process yourself as cumbersome, and it's a lot of paperwork. Obviously, the government is doing that, and many organizations, especially the smaller ones, are loath to get enmeshed in that process for smaller grant amounts. So I'm just trying to get a sense of what kind of levels of funding we're talking about.
Let's talk money. So our grants are at different levels. None of them are massive contracts in any regards. The SB grants, and it always hinges on the availability of funds and congressionally mandated appropriations.
Right.
But usually around the $800,000 amount. And the programming is done over 2 years. And it moves a lot of human bodies. So there's a lot of deliverables, but there's several players that can be involved. So usually in that amount, unless something changes.
So that's a substantial amount for somebody to put together a program. And obviously, as you said, there's a lot of moving parts that have to be accounted for and budgeted in that capacity. When you're working with the other groups like the Sports Envoy program, how does that concept come about? Is that something that you develop internally for a specific idea, or is that based on past relationships and past partnerships?
That's a great question. It's all embassy generated. So the embassies generate the request based on their immediate needs right there in the back door. So the U.S. Embassy says, hey, preventing violent extremism, we really need to develop positive ties with the youth bulge. How can we do so? They're not coming to our technology seminars. but they will come to this basketball scrimmage. And so seeing that, and they submit the proposals to us, we review them. There's a lot, it's not always feasible. They may say, send us LeBron next week, and we'll say, we can't do that, but we're going to send you an amazing WNBA player in 4 months. So we work with them to make it appropriate, and to make it powerful, and to make it worth the program. So it's not just a one-off, so that it builds into a larger strategy, and so that the embassies can use it as a way to shine a light on what they're trying to do, or open doors in hard to reach places.
It's interesting because when you look at, again, how sports breaks down those barriers, there's often other ways of interest in people's first thought process is, again, let's try education, let's try different types of cultural interaction. And in some environments that'll work, and in other environments, it clearly doesn't, because one unifying force, as you know from jumping into your career through the lens of the Olympics and the Olympic Games, is that sports breaks down those barriers and brings the world closer. And so, I was chuckling at your comment about LeBron, because, you certainly have thousands and thousands of organizations in the U.S. that would love him to come and participate there.
And yeah, it's not out of the realm of the possible either. I'm not saying that in any ways, but sometimes it takes some work. But they generally determine what sport and what foreign policy theme, and we have to take into consideration a lot of factors. Well, if it's Ramadan, we shouldn't be doing a sports program. And you mentioned cultural and educational activities, never mutually exclusive. Sometimes it's a part of a larger Education USA fair or something along those lines. So there's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of strategic thinking, because as we know, sports and soft power can be under a kind of a critical lens, especially when it comes to U.S. government taxpayer dollars, and we want to be accountable. We want to have it as a meaningful program that really serves our purpose and has long-lasting impacts.
Yeah, the challenge, as you said, is you're in that context. Then it sounds like you're being responsive to what the embassies are requesting for that programming. How open are they to suggestions, or is that just not something politically that you can get involved with?
I work with the public affairs and cultural affairs officers all the time. To be honest, there's an insatiable demand from the field, all of the embassies, we call them the post, that very rarely are we pitching to them. It's normally like we're just trying to work with them. But sometimes if we know of a program partner that's going to be doing something special overseas, whether we sometimes reverse engineer and a target of opportunity, or if an athlete we know is like, oh my gosh, I'm going to this wrestling tournament, I really want to get involved in something for the community while I'm there in, say, Bulgaria, and then we could go to the embassy and say, would you be interested in doing this while this person or this team may be here? So yes, it's definitely a team effort with the Foreign Service officers and the local staff at our post all around the world.
So in your capacity as a program officer, then how much time do you spend traveling?
That's an interesting question. People think that since I'm at the State Department that I'm jet setting all around the world. And I think I was maybe telling one group that I went to St. Petersburg and everyone thought I went to Russia, but I was going to Florida for the Women's Tennis Association. And then I went to Indianapolis and everyone's like, oh, my family, they're like, she's in India. And I'm like, Appolis for the NCAA in a meeting. So we don't have a massive staff travel budget. That's why we work so closely with our Foreign Service colleagues. We have one Foreign Service position in our office that rotates. I've traveled through different bureaus, and in my personal capacity, I travel and I usually try to sync it up with a visit to see one of our alumni. Our alumni are any participant that's gone through our program, American or international. So I was in Mexico and I met up with some of our soccer sisters, and I went to Haiti and I saw some a Haitian delegate from years past. Not a lot of travel. And right now, of course, not with coronavirus for anyone. And so we are becoming increasingly nimble, of course, with our virtual programming and seeing the value of online engagements, but also missing the true people-to-people connection.
Yeah, it's interesting because as you describe your position, I think most people from the outside would say, well, Trina's going to be in a different country every week of the year going through the programs, and it doesn't sound like that's quite the case.
No, our envoys probably travel more. I mean, I travel on my own. And for certain events, I traveled for another office. I went to Sierra Leone. That was a Tech Women program, very similar to kind of a sister program to the ESPNW exchange, but for women in technology and STEM. And I went to Geneva for a special event, but that was through the US-UN Geneva and a sports program, but not a lot, but I'd like the world to come to me. So I'm in the right place, global-minded, but not a kind of a wanderlust type. So it works out.
And then going back to the other program, which you described as the sports visitor program, is that driven more by the embassies that want to send people here, or more by you creating something that is attractive to them?
These are great questions. So we send out these cable calls to the embassies, and so we'll set the parameters. It's like an open call to eligible embassies that we determine through a process. There's a lot of processes. And so it might say this year we are definitely looking to bring a cohort to the Julie Foudy Leadership Academy camp this summer. So think of a proposal that would send teenage girls and coaches for the soccer program. So we lay out the parameters, but it really is on the embassies to submit their proposals for what they want, who they want to send, why they think that it would be a value add to them if they teamed up with our office. So it's a partnership between our office. We serve as the linchpin essentially between the embassies and the post, the consulates all around the world, and the U.S. sports community. So it's like this bow tie connector relationship, and we're in the center of it along with some other organizations, but that is just kind of a visual for you.
So as you're doing all of these pillars, again, there's a lot of moving parts. What are some ways that members of our network could help support your efforts?
That's a wonderful question. And sometimes it's frustrating in that we can't leverage all of the interest that's out there to team up or to support. But we do, when we have these inbound delegations, we have different programs and activities for them. So I'll be calling up the YMCA DC and saying, could we please tour the facilities and have a leadership panel with you? So we turn to different US-based organizations to host our groups, whether it's the Global Sports Mentoring Program or our sports visitors. And then even the International Sports Programming Initiative programs with their subrecipients. There's a lot of interaction and engagements on the ground, and we always love partners to turn to. Let's say it's a program on sports and mental health. We would be looking out for individuals or organizations who can speak to that subject matter, whether or not it's related to sports. We have a lot of our main go-tos like DC Scores and different Paralympic training sites that we go to a lot. And we work with our different US partners on some of the kind of foundational experiences that we want everyone to have, but we're always open for working with others, and people say, let me know how you can help, how I can help, how I can help. And then a week later, I'm like, remember you said you wanted to help? Well, could you actually do this webinar on health and wellness or something along those lines? So yes, we tap into our sports network here a lot for the inbound programs.
Well, that's great. And I would encourage you to reach out to us because I think directly and certainly through our network, we've got a lot of fantastic organizations doing incredible work in many of the areas that you talked about. And depending on where you're looking around the country, would certainly love to help connect you or work with you as you bring people in. And I'm sure there'll be some of them that are terrific fits for that grant to take programs abroad. And really this whole mentoring concept is really exploding because there's so many levels of that mentorship that exists now, and how many people are able to help support and really feel that they're contributing to something, even if they may not at that point in their life have the financial means to make other contributions. It's a way for them to be involved and give back to those organizations.
I love that. And also, we may well already have all sorts of overlapping contacts within the Sports Philanthropy Network. I saw that Doug Gardner, I think, did a podcast. He's been one of our just long-standing, just outstanding supporters on our Sport for Community global sports mentoring program. So I'm sure there's overlap already in the communities. As you know, the Sport for Social Change kind of world is tight-knit to a certain degree. It used to be even smaller, but now it's a burgeoning space at home and around the world. But I do think that we probably have a lot of overlapping connections already.
Absolutely. So I appreciate you sharing all of your insights. So before we let you go, we want to kind of put you on the spot a little bit here, and we're going to use our sports philanthropy superpowers, and we're going to appoint you as commissioner of a sport. So tell us what sport you would choose.
I might bow out from that opportunity. I don't know. I would say I'm more interested in establishing a ministry of sport for the United States, and I could be the sports czar. So maybe the first minister of sport in the United States. Commissioner, it's kind of a loaded portfolio for many sports. I mean, I could just go on a wild tangent and be like,
so tell us about this minister of sports. Tell us what that would look like then.
Sure. Honestly, so we have this patchwork, this tapestry of sports players in the United States when it comes to international policy and sports, because we don't have a ministry of sport. It's not housed within the government like other countries. And so the USOPC, of course, is pretty much a big leader for, Team USA in the United States. We have Department of Education, but that's domestic. White House to a certain degree, and other, the UN, but we don't have one body that's focused on sports or culture for the United States. So ideally, the Ministry of Sport would have 10, 15, maybe 20 people working on policy, whether it's doping in sport, whether it's human rights violations in mega sporting events, whether it's youth health, race relations in sports, different policy areas focused on more the policy space. And then we'd have 15 to 20 to actually do the people-to-people exchanges, like our bureau is mandated to do. So maybe we'd be a powerhouse of 30 to 40. I would even be chief of staff. I'm happy to be in another position because I know many capable and brilliant. My colleagues are superstars, and a lot of the mentors with whom we've worked are also superstars. So there's a lot of capable sports stars out there. But I think that's
When you look around the world, is that typically a political appointment from the leadership, or how does that sports minister ascend to their throne, so to speak?
that's interesting. I think some may be voted in. I'm not sure, but probably political appointees. Yes, appointed by whomever may prime minister or president, whomever may be at the top, or maybe it's through some type of parliament kind of assignment. It probably varies. That would be a great research project. Someone out there, hey.
Be very interesting to see how that would work and what kind of term it would need to be to make sure that it didn't get too volatile going back and forth, because changing those policies every 2 or 4 years would create a lot of havoc as well. So Trina, I want to thank you very much for coming on. I certainly appreciate your time and sharing all of those details. I think they're going to be very helpful for organizations in our network and for people to understand the type of work that you do, and let you know how they're able to support or connect with you as a resource, so that as you're looking for other groups to collaborate with, that you've got that opportunity.
And thank you. And actually, right now we're I know that there's just a lot of emotion, and there's a lot going on in all of our hearts and our minds, and I definitely stand in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement, and we want to provide more opportunities for Americans in sports diplomacy. So we're actually thinking of ideas as to how we can create more opportunities for, in particular, the Black community and young people here in the United States, and how they can become even more involved in our programs too, or just marginalized communities in general. We're just young people. So we're always evolving, we're always learning, and hoping to do the next best thing, but love sharing our story, and really appreciate your time and what you do. And look forward to staying in touch.
Well, thank you very much again to all of our listeners. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate you participating with us, and we hope you'll join us for the next edition of the Sports Philanthropy Podcast. Have a great day.
We'll tune in. Bye, Roy. Take care.